Good day, everyone, and welcome to the WANA webinar series. As you will notice, all participants have been muted. If you have a question to ask, please send your questions into the Q&A panel located on the bottom right-hand side of your screen, and your question will be answered after the presentation. If you have any technical issues, please send a private chat to the host, the directions of which you can find in the chat window. Thank you for joining today, and please welcome Robbie Vorspan from Clubhouse International.
Hello, Clubhouse community. I wish I could actually see you all, but I know you're there, which is amazing. We're just so happy that we're all together again this morning. And welcome to those of you who have joined us for the first two webinars, and welcome to everyone who's joining us for the first time. So you may have noticed that this webinar series is called the WANA webinar series, but you may not all know what WANA means or why we're calling it that. For those of you who don't know what WANA means, it means we are not alone, and it refers to our Clubhouse family history. Even before there was a Fountain House in New York City, a small group of people who had been discharged from a large state hospital in New York started meeting together to support each other as they tried to make meaningful lives for themselves. They called themselves WANA, We Are Not Alone, because they found that that was the most important and the most basic thing that each of them needed in order to start their journey of recovery. WANA eventually became Fountain House, and Fountain House eventually gave birth to this large, incredibly exciting, and continually growing international community that all of us here belong to. We have our common Clubhouse ancestors, the WANA group, to thank for giving us our beginning. So WANA started as a kind of peer support group drop-in center. But before too long, it became evident that recovery was going to take more than simply not being alone and having friends and support. Once this group of former patients fully understood that they were not alone, they were ready to start the real work of achieving their full potential as people and beginning the process of discovering their own talents and goals and dreams and finding ways to contribute their strengths to their communities. That's what today's webinar is going to be about. In the beginning of this COVID-19 crisis, just like in the beginning of our Clubhouse family history, everyone's biggest concern was finding ways of reaching out to each other, letting everyone know that they're not alone in spite of the physical distancing restrictions that we were under. But just like we learned in our history, that isn't enough for a living, vibrant, growing Clubhouse community. Before long, our Clubhouses realized that Clubhouse members want to do and give and work, and not only be the receiver of reach out and check-in calls from others. Just like the WANA community learned more than 70 years ago, real recovery in real life come when people know that their contributions and their talents matter, and that they have something important to give their community and their society. Receiving support and services is great and it's important, but it's the doing and creating and contributing and working that makes us really grow and achieve our potential as people. So we're thrilled that Genesis Club was willing to take on the challenge of creating this presentation for us today. Genesis Club realized early on in this that if they're going to continue to be a clubhouse during this crisis and not a support group or a case management service, they would need to create a vibrant and accessible and engaging virtual work order day so that members can continue their real recovery journeys even while they're isolated in their homes. So our presenters today are Mike Coppington, who is a member of Genesis Club, who works in the business unit, and Ruth Osterman, who is the program director of Genesis Club. I suggest that you listen really carefully to their presentation because it's chock full of excellent ideas that your clubhouse might be able to use. We're going to send out their PowerPoint presentation to clubhouses after the presentation, so don't worry about catching it all or taking notes because you'll get it afterwards. So take it away, Ruth and Mike.
Thanks, Robbie. So we are thrilled to be webinar number 3 in this series of webinars on operating our clubhouses remotely during the COVID-19 crisis. I think thank you to Fountain House and Clubhouse International for offering this webinar series quickly. And we are not alone also means we don't have to alone figure out how to do this and how to do this well. We've been in touch with a number of you and talked to a lot of clubs about how are you operating remotely and what are best practices. And so today we're just going to share with you our journey so far, and it is a journey in progress, of offering a full and engaging work order day without having a building. So for all of us, this started in a very scary, panic-driven, anxiety-ridden, fear-filled way. It's a pandemic. And the week before, Massachusetts had a stay-at-home advisory or stay-at-home order. Information about COVID-19 and how it was going to affect us was changing several times a day. And every staff and every member was operating with a level of anxiety and fear and questioning. And that's the atmosphere with which we started to prepare to operate remotely. So we were bound and determined to stay open as a community as long as we could, but we were making preparations for having to work from home if that's what we needed to do for a very short period of time. So in the unit structure, we talked about what do we need to do and how do we need to prepare for that. We prepared in each unit comprehensive lists of active members active in the last couple of years with their phone numbers, and staff were taking them home every day in case we couldn't come back to the building. We prepared a sort of guideline for deep, rich, meaningful daily calls so that every member was getting a really great conversation about how they're doing, how things are going, what do they need, how are they filling their time. And we prepared a tip sheet that quickly became obsolete of, some tips on how to spend time alone in your apartment or when you're socially isolated, alone in your home. And then the order came, and the next day we weren't allowed back in the building. I think the experience was, yes, still anxiety, fear, panic, but it was a total loss of structure. Our structure felt glued to the building. And so how do we figure out rebuilding structure? In the first couple of days, staff were doing what we had planned, calling every single, our mantra is contacting every member every day, and it still is. And they were calling every member, which means about 450 people. By the end of the first day and clearly into the second day, it just felt like we were working wrong. This was not going to be a sustainable way of working if this having to work remotely sustained and continued. At that point, we thought it was going to be 2 weeks. It's going into its second month and just got extended in Massachusetts. But in that first week, Clubhouse International provided us some language that really helped us to rethink what we were doing. And that was to stop saying Genesis Club is closed and to say the building is closed, but we're fully open and operating virtually. So then it was, what does that mean? From really the week before we closed, but certainly the first week that we were operating remotely, there was a ton of work going on. But it was very different work than we had organized through our unit structure when we were in the building. So we started relying on Standard 20. What members have opportunity to participate in all of the work, but what is the work? For that, the first couple of weeks, it is contacting every member every day. So it's outreach. But embedded in that outreach was community support services. We were getting a lot of information about resources out there for food pantries or for filling out unemployment applications or to access different needs for supports for members who or people who are parents of school-age children and how to help them online. So the work was, contacting our members every day, getting the most recent information about available community support services and disseminating that to people who needed them, filling care packages in our kitchen for people who need supplements to their food, logging all of our contacts and entering that data so that we could really evaluate our effectiveness, And from the beginning, we've had a core group of under 10 people in our building every day for essential services. And so it was work of building maintenance and answering phones.
And as the work involved, we had to figure out how do we include the members. It wasn't, should we, is it possible? It's just, no, it's how. The members need to be involved. There was a sense of urgency in that, in trying to contact every member every day. So we decided we just needed to jump in, get started, definitely be flexible. We needed to adapt and pivot every day. In engaging the members and calling them through phone calls, through social media, we did run into some barriers and some obstacles. The big one being the technology. Some work started to evolve there where members and staff were working with each other to overcome those technological advancements. There was a lot of isolation, fear, anxiety, but as the members started to feel more included, it's that momentum starts picking up. And as always, the big thing is to make sure that the members felt needed, wanted, expected. Always asking them, what do they think, what do they want? So that's how we've included our members.
So again, feeling that loss of structure, it really dawned on us that we had structures. We had structures to identify the work, to include members in the work. We just had to really rethink them and innovate a little bit in operating a remote work order day. So we brought back unit meetings. We've heard of a lot of clubs that have brought back unit meetings, and that core I skipped that from day one. We were gathering through a phone and video calling conference system in a daily morning meeting at 9 o'clock, which foundationally still is we get together. There's often between 25 and 35 members and staff in the daily morning meeting that sort of organizes the day, and then we formed unit meetings. We were clear that we wanted our unit meetings to be standard 18 unit meetings, so used to organize the work of the day and foster relationships, not just a group outreach opportunity. And how are we going to structure that? Who was standing at the whiteboard? What's on the whiteboard? What does the whiteboard look like? So we did, several days of planning before we actually executed unit meetings to make sure we had a good structure for that. We don't do daily unit meetings. That is difficult for us to do. We have 6 units at Genesis Club, and each unit meets twice a week. And in that unit meeting agenda, we plan the work for those interim days between unit meetings and plan out how we're going to execute that together. Before we started unit meetings together, we put together a template of what a unit meeting agenda would look like or is. What that whiteboard would be, what is the work so far, calling members, who would like to join in calling members, how do we celebrate birthdays, who would like to figure out what to post on Facebook over the next couple of days, those kinds of things. So that every unit uses that template of a unit meeting agenda, but every unit has also evolved into adding work in their unit as the work has evolved. So the unit meetings are structured in a way of asking for virtual side-by-side assistance with members with the work that's going on, which is really challenging because sometimes it's like, okay, how do we do that? How do we include you? All right, I'll call you. We'll email back and forth. We'll, get together in a group conversation. But we're always figuring out the inclusion piece.
And in order to do so, the daily telephone calls really became the infrastructure, because that's where those morning meeting topics are coming from, and it's also how the results of the meeting are getting communicated back to the members. In case a member missed a meeting or they weren't able to stay for the whole meeting, you can find the meeting minutes, you can find the agendas, so everybody's involved, even if they weren't able to attend for a myriad of reasons. Those telephone calls, they definitely as the infrastructure, they promote member communication, and they kind of take place of that those casual cafe or lunchtime conversations, but they also allowed members and staff to gain access to new work that, if a staff member is calling 400 people a day or a few hundred people a day, they're talking to people that they may not have been able to get a chance to talk to if not for this happening. And it's given them a chance to foster new relationships, but really cement those existing relationships, working, side by side over the phone through a pandemic. And of course, with the morning meeting, the unit meeting, it only made sense that we'd add more meetings. So we were hearing a lot from our young adult and our older adults, different feedback, but feedback that needed to be addressed. From our young adults, we were hearing a lot about isolation, anxiety, feeling alone, wanting to access their other young adult peers and really get involved. Whereas with the older adults, it's become clear that there's a demographic there that's in fear of becoming infected. So they've both committees meet once a week. The older adult committee focuses on best practices. There's obviously the social aspect to it, but they're working on how to stay. How to maintain healthy. And then the young adult committee, we're meeting every week. We're working on Mental Health Awareness Month, and members are starting to come back. And the feedback is that they're super enjoyed that they have something to do and something to feel supportive about. And then the last set of meetings that we've added back so far are two current weekly employment meetings. One is a job seekers meeting that we brought back that we were using when we were operating normally. And then we also added a meeting for furloughed employees. So it's for members who had a job before COVID-19, are furloughed until it ends and the economy opens back up. So it's just easing those anxieties about, is there going to be a backlog of work when they go back? What can they be prepared for? How do they communicate with their employees during this time?
So here's what we're doing now, and we keep adding to this as the unit meetings evolve and the work evolves. I wanted to highlight a couple of things here. Probably one of the jobs that members love to get involved with and is offered in every unit meeting is partnership outreach. And this has been a real bonus for staff too, who have felt the burden of the daily calls have all been on them. In unit meetings, we say, who'd like to spend an hour doing some group calls? So Mike might sign up, and so how about tomorrow at 1? I'll call Mike. Mike and I will stay on the line for an hour, and then we'll add and talk to 4 or 5 different members during that hour that we're at different times individually, so that the outreach has become partnered again like it was in the building. And I think members receiving those calls really think they're kind of fun and think it's a different way to get a daily call. And members who sign up for it, we have a lot of members liking that job because it gives them something to do during the day. They feel socially connected again, and they're helping to kind of check in with members and see what's going on out there. Another big thing that evolves in every single unit meeting is identifying technology barriers. So in our daily telephone call infrastructure and in the partnered outreach calls, we're talking about the unit meeting, and members are saying, I've been calling into the unit meeting, but a lot of people video in. I don't know how to do that. So we'll bring that to the unit meeting, and a member and staff will sign up to call that person needing help to access, either learn how to use their device to video into the meeting or to obtain a better device. And we've received some emergency funds from our community foundation to upgrade member devices to allow them more and more access as they want access. So in almost every unit meeting, there's a member identified who needs support in becoming technologically more astute, and there's members who are willing to give them a call or partner with them on doing that. We're continuing entering a ton of data every day and doing our billing in the Clubhouse. So we have one member and one staff in our business unit sitting at opposite ends of the unit doing that. Mike signs up for that job a lot. So we have a member and a staff coming in every day for 3 hours and entering that data, members and staff coming in to prepare and purchase the care packages and distribute in the kitchen unit. So the work has really evolved, and we've felt really kind of busy in the last couple of weeks and at all times figuring out member inclusion in that work.
And so as the virtual remote clubhouse has evolved, as Ruth mentioned, the structure's coming back. We're feeling busy again. We're feeling like things are going a little more smoothly. But at the same time, we're reflecting on ourselves. Are these new revised services effective? And I think the overwhelming response thus far is that they are very effective. We've been getting feedback that it's adding structure to people's days. It's making them feel more healthy. It's giving them a reason to get out of bed. It's an alternative to Fox News and CNN, and it's bringing back that fun and meaningful work. We brought back our Wellness Wednesday, Wednesday stretches, nutrition tips, and we're doing our weekly recap again through news and views over Facebook. And those skills that we're learning in upgrading technology, and it's opening up avenues for research and improving skills that'll help us as members and staff and as a clubhouse overall down the road. Those social media platforms that we're learning about and the technological skills will be beneficial down the road, most likely.
So yeah, I think we know that we're not going to go from having, fewer than 10 people in the building to being able to open back up to our average daily attendance between 75 and 100. We know it's going to be a slow opening, as the world is saying. So we know we're going to have to keep in place as we slowly reopen, probably through 2020, opportunities for members to remotely access the meetings and the work opportunities and other opportunities that are going on at Genesis Club. We're not real sure what's going to sustain and what's not going to sustain. A couple of things we were struggling with before we had to close the building is, a lot of our members in the older adult committee, for example, people who had become medically infirmed and weren't able to come into the club, we were visiting once a month, but maybe there's a way they can phone into meetings or eventually video into meetings. That might be something that sustains. We've started with new member referral and intake and tours, and some of those practices might sustain. So for a prospective member who really is hesitant to walk into the building and take a tour, we could do some video conferencing, we could do a FaceTime or a virtual tour, building relationships remotely until the person is feeling like they want to come in. So we know that some of the things we have to do now, because we have no choice, we're operating remotely, are also going to enhance our work order day once we are fully functioning and fully operating Clubhouse with full use of the building. So we thought we'd kind of stop there and see if there's questions and answers out there. Stop sharing, maybe?
Thank you. For those that have a question that they would like to ask, please submit your questions or your comments in the Q&A panel located in the bottom right-hand side of your screen. Your first question is, are members included in the group of 10 people who go and come into the building?
So yes, we have identified specific jobs that we need being done in the building. Data entry is the main one. Well, there's two: data entry and work in the kitchen to prepare care packages. So those units, through their unit meeting structures, are doing a weekly schedule, and they're pretty regular schedules where members who come in tend to be the same members who can get here, who are following good safety practices. We have the wipes, we walk in the door and we grab a wipe and we wipe down everything that we touch, and anytime we use a computer before and the end. But yes, of the 10 people in the building every day, 3 or 4 of them are members.
Right.
Who are here to do specific jobs. Mm-hmm. It's not a social time, so right. It's here to complete to work. To work.
Thank you. Your next question: are members coming in to do landscaping, taking care of the grounds at the clubhouses?
That's a really funny question, because we were just battling with the members who are landscaping currently outside our window. So yes, yeah, we have a small group. Was it 2 or 3?
2 people at
Yeah,
a time.
2 people.
Face masks, distanced. It's through a schedule, so we're not just saying show up and do that, so that we can honor the distancing.
Right.
But
yeah, taking care of plantings, mulching, making sure that the grounds are clean. Yeah.
I should also say we've used this opportunity of not having people in the building to complete some renovations that we had planned anyway. We have some new carpeting here in our conference room. We did some painting. We've done some deep cleaning. And so we also schedule a staff and a member in of those units to remove the furniture in preparation for the renovations and to bring stuff back in and set it up. It's all scheduled through unit meetings. On Mondays we're doing this, on Tuesdays, and then identifying which staff and which member are going to come in through a weekly schedule to work to complete a job.
Thank you. And how do you decide what members can come into the building when I'm sure that there are many that want to do so?
So there aren't many who want to do so, which I think is, what we thought that too, and we wanted to be really protective, not to say, whoever wants to come in, because that would send a false message out there. We're very clear what the job is. So members to enter data in the unit. And actually for that job, that was identified before we closed the building. Mike's willing to do that, Joe's willing to do that, and we have another member who's willing to do that. And in the unit meeting, other members check in and say, how is that going? But we don't have a lot of members saying, I'd be willing to do that. But so we're doing through the daily infrastructure when we need a member, and as well as identifying it in the unit meeting. Again, the person would have to be able to get here. We're not putting people in our car. We're not picking people up. A lot of our members are not comfortable taking public transportation right now. They feel a risk of exposure there. So we haven't really had an issue with too many members wanting to come in. And there's small opportunities to complete a specific piece of work.
It was, and I think the selection was targeting specific skill sets.
And skills. You have to know how to enter that data in the business unit to do that.
Thank you. And do you have any advice for clubhouses that are beginning to enter phase 2 of reopening?
I think my advice would be, please share how you're doing that.
Yeah.
It has become, actually Kinga from Fountain House and I were talking just before that, it has and from what I understand, the clubhouses in Sweden never closed. And so they may have some tips for the rest of us. As in Massachusetts, our stay-at-home order was, we had a stay-at-home order through May 4th, and our governor yesterday just moved that 2 weeks out. Lots of questions come. Can we come back in on May 4th? Can we come back in on May 4th? We've started to turn that question around to, we'll see what the governor says, but what safety precautions do we have to put in place that you'll feel safe when you come back in? And that question has generated such great conversations in units and among members. I'm not sure that I'd feel safe unless everybody wore face masks. Should we hand out gloves at the door? How do we do the distancing in different units? So I think we're in the process at Genesis Club right now of just sparking everybody's thoughts about that and making sure that every individual staff and member feels comfortable coming in and that we have the right safety precautions in place. Very much we want to learn from what other clubs are doing, though, that are reopening.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And Robbie, did you have any comments on that, or would you like the next question?
I think a lot of clubhouses are having the same reaction that you just expressed, Ruth, that everybody wants to hear from everybody else. And, we're sort of approaching that wave of how are we going to do this? And Clubhouse International has been collecting information from like the Asian clubhouses that are ahead of us and have started to do that. and like, some of the clubhouses in Europe. And we want to do a webinar about that, but we want to wait until we have, some more actual solid information before we just put stuff out there. But we will do that in the future.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Your next question, what system do you use for video conferencing?
So we were fortunate enough to have the WebEx system, and we had been using the WebEx system to do some training and video conferencing through our training center. So we use our WebEx conferencing system for all of our in-house meetings, and that's really because the one number and one access code gets you into every single meeting. And so for a member who wants to come into the morning meeting and then the unit meeting later and maybe join the older adult committee meeting later, there's one phone number to call into. All you have to remember is what time that meeting is going to be held. So the WebEx conference system has worked well for us.
Definitely, and just to add on that, we did discuss, we went over a handful of different platforms. We looked at Zoom. We did a webinar back when this was first becoming a serious issue with the local Worcester Chamber of Commerce. We, kind of explored all of the options, and I think it just worked out that our existing system was the best and the most secure. We're hearing a lot of security issues out there as well.
Great. Your next question, have you found good ways to get contact information for folks that do not have current information up to date?
It comes up regularly in most unit meetings. And we actually asked that as one of our unit meeting agenda items. Are there people you haven't been able to reach? So we then go to, let's send them a note. Do we have an address? And again, there's a few of us in the building that have access to the database with other contact information that isn't phone. So we then go to, let's send them a note, say we're trying to reach them. Could they give us an accurate phone number? That works with somewhat. It doesn't work great. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things we've realized is that we don't have email addresses for most of our members. We just never made a concerted effort to, and almost intentionally didn't, collect email addresses for members because we wanted them to be in the building, right? And we wanted more face-to-face kind of meetings. But now we're starting to say, boy, that we really need email addresses because a lot of the work that we're organizing in unit meetings, we could be emailing to each other and sharing through an email opportunity. So for people we don't have accurate phone numbers on, we hadn't been collecting other data other than address. So one of the things we're learning is we should and we will moving forward.
And it's going back to the new skills too, where members are learning how that maybe never had an email account before or had access to social media. So it's helping in that way too.
Your next question. What does your social event program look like? Is the community gathering virtually for social events on evenings and weekends?
No. Right?
Right.
No.
So we haven't really done any evening weekend program socially.
No.
Each of our work units has a Facebook page that, and we often, and I think in the first webinar that we did, Fanton House sort of identified the platforms they use for components of the Clubhouse program. And the Facebook pages, I think, are the pages that we use to be a bit social with each other. We do pass on information. We post unit meeting agendas and minutes on the Facebook pages. We share resources. But we also get kind of silly on the Facebook pages. And our Wellness Wednesday stretches on Facebook that people can join. One of our staff started almost on the second day lunch with Ryan. He's a pretty good cook, actually. And members go in to do lunch with Ryan because it's kind of fun. So if we offer any kind of social program, I would say we do some virtual walks through Facebook, but we are not doing anything formal on the evenings or weekends yet.
And how do you handle virtual tours? Do you do them through Zoom?
So this has been, in setting it up, this has been a really big conversation in our membership services unit meetings. Actually, the whole new member process has been a huge conversation, because what we know is referrals that we're getting now during the period of time, during COVID-19 and during a period of time we're operating remotely, are not, those people being referred aren't looking for employment, structure to their day, education, housing, like referrals that we used to get. You know, they're socially isolated, they need a connection, they're looking for different things. So we've kind of had to shake up our whole referral intake orientation process. How do we do orientation with no building? So with referrals, we're pairing a staff member to do daily calls with that person and build a relationship around, to get to know them, to communicate what's going on in the clubhouse. And at a certain point where they might like to see the building, we're kind of doing a FaceTime. Mike might do this. So he would get somebody on a video, if they have that technology, and say, do you just want to see our building? Because in a new member referral, when our building is not open, the tour is not a very compelling thing. They can't come in the building anyway, and it doesn't describe a whole lot about the services that we offer. So it'd be a small look-see around the building, a couple of unit boards, but that relationship we're building and then joining unit meetings and other committee meetings is really going to be more compelling for people. You went to say.
Right. No, I think it's definitely related. We're also, like, for instance, in the young adult committee, which I'm a part of, we have been asking young adults who were just signing up for orientation, had done a day of orientation and couldn't come back. We're trying to get them involved in our weekly virtual meetings, even though they're not fully members, but that's a way to introduce them into the clubhouse as well.
And how the clubhouse works.
Right.
Yeah.
We had some great feedback come in. Genesis Rocks also with a question. Are you guys billing for telehealth based on virtual clubhouse participation?
So the state of Massachusetts clubhouses are not funded by Medicaid. We are funded by the Department of Mental Health, and prior to the building being closed, we were billing a per service attendance in the clubhouse or an offsite, if that offsite face-to-face or phone call was around an employment, education, or housing. As COVID-19 happened, this Department of Mental Health in Massachusetts said you can bill for any contact you make with every member, no matter how you make it. So phone, video, face-to-face, email, social media. So we, I think, feel fortunate to be in the state of Massachusetts. We are billing for every contact that we're making, which is why we keep talking about data entry, because it takes about 4 hours, Mike, to enter 1 day of contacts, because we're making about, or we're attempting to make about 400 to 450 contacts every day, and we're billing for all of that.
And how do you respond to and help members who need help with groceries?
Well, in various ways. I think we're talking to every member every day. So we, as Mike said, we know members so much better than when we're sort of rushing through the clubhouse. So individually, maybe we can go on a website to order groceries to be delivered. What's the barrier, right? Is it money? Is it you're afraid to leave your house? Is it you don't have transportation? And then we will meet that barrier. So if it's I'm afraid to leave my house, we might do an online delivery order together side by side, because members don't know how to do that. We might give information to a food bank. The care packages that I keep talking about is we are supplementing our members who need added food when they call and ask for a care package. It's not designed to be a meal, but it is designed to sort of get you through a period of time until we can help you with the barrier that's preventing you from accessing food. So I would say many ways.
And is the Genesis Club utilizing a specific social media or alternate platform to help make the virtual whiteboard accessible to members?
So Facebook has been our virtual platform, and the unit pages in Facebook. The Young Adult Committee has started to work on Slack.
Yes.
We heard about Slack from a couple other clubhouses, Stanton House and the Academy at Glengarry in Florida, and we started to explore that.
Yeah, and it's been great thus far. That kind of goes back to when we were looking at all these different platforms. I had used Slack in college. Another young adult member had used Slack, so it kind of just came naturally. We've been using it efficiently for probably 2 to 3 weeks now, and it's been great. It's a place to aggregate all our data so everybody can have access to what we're working on. You can add the different channels, so and members are really buying into it, which is great.
So we may expand the use of Slack to other committees and other areas, and we may go into other platforms as well. Just to say, in looking at our data, because we do, in that contact data, we say the means that the person connected with Genesis Club, only about 30 people a day are through social media or through those platforms. So that's, again, helping people access that technology and utilize that technology and not be afraid of that technology. So the phone, we're still doing most of our work through phone, but we need to build our members' ability to access that technology before we go too far into putting everything on it, and then only 30 people can really access it.
And how do you replicate the valuable experience of side-by-side work when working virtually?
For myself as a member, it's been great. When this first started, I was isolating myself. I was anxious. I was, I just done a whole bunch of good work on my mental health, and now, I get hit in the face with COVID-19. So those initial phone calls from the staff members in the business unit were huge. I mean, no matter what we talked about, just the fact that somebody was calling and the phone was ringing was a good start.
And then as we start working on a side-by-side, side-by-side is never physical anymore. It's phone. I'll call you about that, and we'll figure that out over the phone. It's how members and staff decide to work on whatever they signed up for together. Some may do a video conference through a platform they're comfortable with. Slack has been a way to do the side-by-side work in the Young Adult Committee.
Yes.
Email. Why don't I draft that, and then I'll email that to you, and then we'll get on the phone and see what the final product is going to look like. We have to really, with every job, we have to be creative and kind of innovative about how that side-by-side is, and we have figured that out together, but we've figured it out every time. It's much more time-consuming than if we were in the building and could belly up to the computer together and just knock that off, which is kind of why we're only doing unit meetings a couple of times a week, because it does take a little longer to work side-by-side when you're working remotely side-by-side, but it's infinitely rewarding.
Absolutely, yeah. And there's plenty of ways, like on Facebook, you can jump in on the new outreach groups that we started in each unit, and you can instantly access a staff member or a member. And in Slack, there's direct messaging, so staff can work directly with members. We're finding all the ways.
And are you able to help members with clinical and medication issues should they arise?
So that's been interesting. And, from the first couple of days, Robbie said it in the introduction, we knew our role was as clubhouse staff, and it wasn't case managers, and it was a slippery slope to get into, somebody else's lane that wasn't our lane, if you will. The move to telehealth for all of our members in terms of accessing their appointments has been, I would say, more anxiety-provoking than smooth, though I think as time goes on, it gets smoother. So in a lot of our daily phone calls, we're talking to people about how to access that. We might be calling the provider for information to help them, or linking them up with the provider to do that. And then certainly talking with them after about whether they felt it was a helpful appointment or not through telehealth. We've had a lot of people with very good experiences, and we've had people who just feel that it wasn't that good. For our members, I don't think they've had any issues accessing medication, though we were certainly poised to pick things up at the pharmacy and deliver to somebody's doorstep if people needed that. We have we had an offer, we have a nice partnership with UMass Medical School in many, many, many ways, but early on we got an offer from the psychiatry department there that the medical students, the UMass medical students, could supplement our outreach for members who were feeling particularly anxious or struggling or wanted an additional conversation and felt more comfortable with somebody who had some medical training. And that's been a wonderful resource. So 2 or 3 members that I sort of triage that, and 2 or 3 members, staff will call me and say, you know, Mike is feeling like it would be nice to talk to a medical student, and we give those names to the medical students, and that's been a wonderful resource. So we've found ways, often we're getting back to, can you tell your provider that, and how can we support you to tell your provider that?
And have you found that members have been motivated or empowered to organize among themselves when it comes to keeping in touch, goal setting, or hobby-related online gatherings?
Yes, definitely. As a member myself, I've seen that firsthand. Like in the young adult committee, we were out of touch for a few weeks there, and now that we've come back together, the members were taking our social relationships past that work aspect as well, virtually.
I think even the partnering outreach sort of started people thinking about it, and you know, the member I'm partnering with might say, hey Bob, I'll give you a call again tomorrow if that's okay. And so it has started people really figuring that out on their own. The question triggered for me action planning. So all of our members have annual goal plans, and that's required by our funder, but members like that too. That we halted that in the first 2 or 3 weeks, because how could you think about what your goal was for this year when you just were afraid of this virus? But we've started completing, if somebody's action plan was due in April, we're calling them, and that's work that's happening over the phone, and we're organizing that through unit meetings too.
This will be your last question today. In regards to the data entry, what data are you putting in? I understand that outreach, but will you also be putting in all the members attending meetings, workshops, maybe members who come into the buildings or other things that they're doing?
No.
Well, in we put every member who had a contact that day, and then how they were contacted.
Right. So
we don't get very specific. If somebody is coming in to a meeting, we would put that as a telephone contact, even if they're videoing in. And we just had this conversation earlier this week. Should we start to differentiate if they videoed in as opposed to phoned in, so we can get a handle on what people are using? So we do telephone, face-to-face, social media, text, and email. So a contact would be under one of those 5 headings.
And then whether that one of those 5 types or 6 types of contacts, whether it was successful, whether you left a voicemail, and then the type of outreach, we're starting to look at that too. You know, were we talking about employment? Were we talking about housing? Was it just a social or a wellness call? And then we're tracking which units calling which people, and you know, obviously the member themselves, so we can see. We were talking. That's how we figured out we're each unit's calling 300 or 400 people a day.
Well, the whole club is calling 400 people a day.
Right.
So each unit is certainly doing their fair share of those contacts.
Thank you, team. I'll go ahead and pass it back to Robbie for some closing remarks.
Okay, well, thank you guys. That was incredibly valuable and important information, and we have a lot more questions that we can't get to. So at the end of the presentation, Jessica's going to put up a screen that will give you an email address that you can send these your questions too, so we can continue this great conversation. In regard to that last question about the kind of data that Genesis is collecting, next week for our webinar, we're going to do, hopefully you've all gotten emails about the research survey that we're putting out to try to get that kind of data from clubhouses around the world about how we're doing during this crisis, and how effective clubhouses are really doing. So hopefully you will all get that and complete those surveys, and we're going to have a brief update about where we are with that. We're not far enough in to really give you a full reporting on it, but that'll be next Wednesday, and then the following week, Progress Place in Toronto is going to present about what our clubhouse communities are learning about ourselves and our values and our standards and our flexibility and our agility during this COVID crisis. So that will be May 13th, and we'll be sending out announcements about all of those. In the meantime, I want to thank Mike and Ruth and the whole Genesis community for being leaders in this and for their incredibly valuable presentation. So thank you, and we'll see you all next week.
Thank you all for joining. If we have not answered your question, please send an email to wanawebinars@fountainhouse.org. The email spelling is located in the chat window for you on the right-hand side. The recording will be available next week, and the slides will be distributed tomorrow. There will be a short survey on screen once the event ends. Please take a moment to fill it out and give us your feedback. Thank you for coming to today's webinar. Please be on the lookout for announcements regarding our future webinars. Have a great day.